Before we move forward, we want to take a moment to extend a special thank you to Glenfarne, who is a proud sponsor of this year's Alaska Sustainable Energy Conference and a key partner in helping advance Alaska's role in global energy markets through the Alaska LNG project. To share more about their vision and work, please turn your attention to the screen for a short message from Glenfarne.
In today's evolving world, Glenfarne stands at the intersection of proven energy expertise and innovative infrastructure investment. We are a global company focused on development, operations, and investment across the energy spectrum. Our more than 800 team members across the Americas have over a decade of operational excellence building, acquiring, and operating our robust portfolio of 60 energy assets spanning 3 gigawatts of grid stability and renewable power, and developing 33 million tonnes of LNG. Our power plants are relied upon by nations to secure their national electric grids against disruption. Our LNG plants, Texas LNG, set to make a final investment decision in late 2025, and Magnolia LNG are critical energy security projects that will provide a stable and secure source of LNG to the world for decades to come. And our newest LNG project, Alaska LNG, a strategically positioned, large-scale energy project including an import terminal, export terminal, pipeline, and gas treatment facility that will deliver reliable, low-emission natural gas from the US to key partners in Asia in 2 competitive and economic phases. Phase 1, a vital pipeline from the North Slope to Anchorage that must be built to solve Alaska's looming natural gas shortage and ensure that critical US military installations have the energy they need to protect the homeland and our Asian allies. Phase 2, the extension of the pipeline to the 20 million tonnes per annum LNG export facility to be constructed in Nikiski in conjunction with a carbon capture and gas processing facility being built on the North Slope. Despite some market misconceptions, the Alaska LNG project is an economically attractive, competitively priced source of reliably delivered LNG for Asian buyers with or without government support. The project leverages 800 miles of existing right-of-way, with each part of the project fully permitted and aligned with both US energy policy and global demand. The gas pipeline parallels the Trans-Alaska Pipeline route for the first 400 miles, allowing for easier and efficient construction, and then follows the vital, long-standing Alaska Railway corridor to its terminus. Alaska LNG has significant geopolitical, energy security, and sustainable design advantages. A shorter route to Asia through uncontested and safe shipping lanes, a long-term stable supply of gas from a trusted ally, and carbon capture and sequestration lowering emissions and aligning with future energy benchmarks. These advantages, together with Glenfarne's developer-focused approach and project finance expertise, position Alaska LNG as the leading US LNG project, particularly to Asia. Glenfarne is targeting a final investment decision for Phase 1 of the pipeline on an accelerated basis, followed shortly by Phase 2, the LNG facility and associated projects. Glenfarne brings capital discipline, execution capability, and a record of on-time delivery. We are building Alaska LNG to operate it safely, responsibly, and profitably for decades to come. Join Glenfarne in building Alaska LNG, an economically attractive, reliable, and price-competitive LNG facility to enhance global energy security and satisfy energy demand in Alaska and Asia.
And now it is my distinct honor to welcome to the stage Governor Mike Dunleavy to speak more about this important partnership and Alaska's energy future. So please, everyone, join me in welcoming Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy.
Good morning, everybody. As we can see, the excitement continues here in Alaska, here in the United States, and in the Pacific Rim, and hopefully for our partners all over the globe that are here today. We're gonna have a discussion here in a moment about Glenfarne, about this a great Alaska natural gas project. What does the future hold? We're going to go through a series of questions so we can all better understand where this project's going. I want to thank all of our friends that are here. I want to thank our friends from Taiwan for being here and speaking this morning, I think so eloquently on the need for secure energy, not just for Alaska, but for our friends in the Pacific. And we're working very hard to meet our timelines and to meet your needs. At this point, I'd like to bring up Brendan Duval, who is the CEO of Glenfarne. We're going to learn a lot about Glenfarne here in a moment, a lot about this project, and hopefully we're going to demystify a number of things regarding this project. This project has been talked about, in some cases, for 50 years, through very different viewpoints, very different lens, how this project is going to basically help this country, help this state, and help this world. And we feel that we are truly on the cusp. You're going to see some bona fide and positive benchmarks being talked about today, benchmarks that will be met and timelines that will be met. And our goal is that this time next year when we're speaking to you, you will see a lot of agreements signed, you will see pipe ordered, and you will see this project getting ready to roll. So with that, I'd like to bring up Brendan Duval. Brendan?
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Governor Dunleavy. Thank you for the welcome. As you can imagine, for an energy developer to be invited to develop a project like this, it's a really amazing opportunity, but more importantly, a responsibility. And we're going to be doing business with many of the people in the audience here, the local Alaskans, the national entities, and our international friends. And so it is going to be an intimate relationship with so many areas of the ecosystem of the Alaska energy community. And so I thought I would, just before I sat down with Governor Dunleavy, do what your mum and dad taught you to do, is introduce yourself, do the polite thing so you know who you're going to be doing business with. So I originally grew up in Australia. I'm a dual citizen of the US and Australia, roughly half of my life in both countries. I grew up in a small country town outside of Sydney, and when I graduated high school, I went and studied electrical engineering. I ended up getting a robotics degree. But importantly, like many of us, we had to pay for college, and I'm very proud of my role. I was a member of the Australia's Welders Union. I was a pipe welder, small ball pipe, in the repair and maintenance of steel mills and power plants. And that paid for my college. It was a great experience, and it was a good way for me to better understand when people are working hard in their coveralls and they go home at night. It taught me a lot about safety, the camaraderie of the workers, and if you know how to inspire them and lead them, you can actually get an amazing amount of efficiency out of those workers. The other thing I learned from that was I was a terrible welder, and I knew that I couldn't make a long-term living out of welding, so I ended up going into the investment industry, and I spent 15 years with an Australian infrastructure developer and investor called Macquarie Group. And that brought me to the United States, where I started Macquarie's New York office 25 years ago, doing major capital projects, investing, often dropping in as the CEO. And I really enjoyed the engineering and the construction side of those projects. I spent a small detour living in Caracas, Venezuela in the late 90s, and people may remember that's when Hugo Chavez got into power. And that actually created, where you might have seen in the video, we started our business in South America. And so we started our very first power plant in a remote island 1,000 kilometers south of Santiago. We had to get in a ferry, put our car on the ferry to get out there. And that was roughly 13 years ago. We're now 800 employees, 60 assets. We're going to start building Texas LNG at the end of this year. That's a $7 billion project, but I'll tell you a bit more about that. And Governor Dunleavy and I met last year. We were at Sarah Week, and Frank and Matt from AGDC approached me. And we've been having a tremendous amount of success on Texas LNG. And it was during that the governor saw and he said, do you think you can bring some of that private individual developer capability to Alaska? And I'm proud to say we've accepted that challenge, and the governor and I are going to talk a little bit about why we did it and why this project makes so much sense.
So we're going to have a conversation. And through this conversation, I think we're going to learn a lot about Glenfarne, about motivation, and really about this project. So, Brendan, you're right. I mean, I stumbled into your office. I wouldn't say stumbled. I mean, we had a meeting set up. But nonetheless, we had a conversation down there. And I think that conversation ignited some things. Because as I mentioned, this project has been talked about and talked about and talked about. And it's gone through different iterations, what could happen, what couldn't happen, et cetera. And for the longest time, and I'll be brief, for the longest time, the gas was actually, in some cases, more valuable in helping with our oil production up on the North Slope. I'm going to give you quick timelines. Around 2014, 2015, our watchdog, state watchdog, AOGC, our Alaska Oil and Gas Commission, basically, allowed BTUs of gas to start to come off of the slope. This was significant. 2014, I believe, was the date. I could have the date wrong, and I was in the Senate. We had passed 2 enabling bills to build the Alaska Gas Line project for an in-state project and an export project. In 2020, all the permits for the project were secured. All the federal permits under President Trump were secured. When the Biden administration came in, they supported the project. It was during this time that loan guarantees were also put in to help the project. And those loan guarantees are inflation-proof, with some estimates up above $30 billion now for the loan guarantees. President Trump comes back in. Before he won office again, he put out a video for Alaska, a campaign video in which he highlights the Alaska Natural Gas Pipeline project. He's elected. He campaigns partially on energy, partially on this project. He gets elected on day 1 of his office. He issues an executive order solely for Alaska, focused around energy, critical minerals, et cetera, because he saw before what Alaska could do to help the country and help the world. And then here we are basically today. We signed an agreement. We signed an agreement in Tokyo that Glenfarne would be the private lead. We had a fantastic trip to Asia with visiting our allies in Taiwan, friends in Bangkok, Thailand, friends in Korea, friends in Japan. And we feel we're on our way to really something very tangible. And we're going to talk about why that is and what that looks like. And so, Brendan, we talked about Glenfarne. Glenfarne's a real company that does real work in South America, does real work in Texas. But do you want to just talk just briefly about that so we can all understand where you're coming from as we apply what you've learned there and what you're doing there to this project in Alaska? Well,
that's a good question. And so you saw a little bit of it on the video, but just a little bit more detail. So we're a developer, which means we send out team members out, engineers, land people. We look for the right sort of land. We look at the engineering studies and we see what sort of energy asset we can build. We've also got a capability to take older assets and rebuild them and turn them around. So we've created this really hands-on capability. That's resulted in us building the main grid stability power plant business in Chile. We are the #1 provider of grid stability for the nation of Chile, and I'm proud to say that due to a transmission line, the whole country went into blackout, and earlier this year we brought the whole country back from zero. In Colombia, we play a very similar role, and it's in Colombia where we started importing LNG. So we built an import capability in 2019. We started ordering cargoes of LNG from Texas, and we were doing that because Colombia, a little bit like Alaska here, was having a declining gas reserves situation. And anyway, we were powering our power plants, and then we saw that there were project development opportunities on the Gulf Coast of Texas. So we stepped in and we brought some development capabilities over. We brought the Texas LNG project, we bought the Magnolia project, and it was during that time that we had to get really smart on the fundamental economics of global LNG pricing and construction. And we are here today where We are now going to finance. I was sitting with the rating agencies last week to issue, we've got a $5 billion debt and equity issuance coming out later this year. And I had to explain to them that the construction costs today, live construction costs, and the LNG liquefaction price that we're charging, the numbers work, and they work very, very well. And that's positioned me really well when I look at the Alaska LNG project, because I know exactly now, independent of any study that's going on the Alaska project, for the LNG facility to be built. And I'm very, very detailed knowledge. And that really, all that experience, operating costs, financing capabilities, engineering, development, really positioned us well to make the call to join Alaska on this project.
So let's look at a little history very briefly, and then look at the project and how the project is going to be viewed differently. So, as we mentioned earlier in this conference, Alaska pioneered LNG export for the world. It was Alaska that did that, sending gas to our Japanese allies for 50 years, starting in 1969, until the Cook Inlet gas field just out the window here started to be depleted. In 1974, we began the construction of TAPS. At that time, it was an engineering marvel, one of the largest projects on the face of the earth. Many people, you're going to see parallels here, many people said it could not be done. It's never been done before. It's an 800-mile pipe carrying oil at 130, 140 degrees, a very hot oil coming out of the ground, large volumes over hostile terrain, mountain ranges, rivers, permafrost, you name it. That pipeline has been one of the most successful projects, I think, on the planet in the history of oil and gas. It still has oil flowing through today. You heard us talk just the other day about a renaissance on the North Slope. We're at about 495 barrels. We anticipate upwards of 600 to 700,000 barrels here by 2030, 31, and even more after that. That pipeline, because of the engineering and the understanding, even back in the 70s, using 60s and 70s technology and engineering, may be with us for another 50 years. So now, the question of whether Alaska can build pipelines, have pipelines ever been built, have LNG exports ever been built in Alaska? The answer is yes. There's no other state with a pipeline of this complexity that we currently have. And again, we engineered export. So here we have this massive project in the minds of people, 44, 50, 60, I've heard some people say $80 billion. And I think what happened, one of the things that was significant that happened is we had a discussion about breaking the project down into 3 phases. And the reason for that is Alaska's gas field, the very gas field that we exported gas to Japan, we rely on here as well. And it's becoming depleted rapidly. And the other significant thing to keep in mind is Alaska is really America's military base. We are the forward salient in the Arctic, in the Western Pacific, and the Northern Pacific. And some people would say in hostile territory, in some cases hostile neighbors. So we have to make sure that our bases, the integrity, the operational integrity is secured. We're only going to be able to do that if we can provide energy to our bases. And I'll say something I haven't mentioned, which I think is very significant. We've had a very warm winter in Alaska this year, but last year was different. Last year we had 2 spats, two periods of time of about 30 below zero in south central Alaska, extended periods of cold snaps. That was that caused a real draw on our gas reserves. And I can recall giving the commander a call at the base saying, we're going to need your help in turning down the thermostat. This is 2024. You cannot call a commander of a base in the Arctic, subarctic, in the Pacific, and ask them to conserve energy. That really was, I think, a turning point for us. I know discussions in the Trump administration, for everyone who's concerned about national security, that is significant. And so breaking this project down into 3 phases is important. Do you want to talk about each of the phases?
So if we break it down into phases, each phase, what we found was independently economically financeable. It breaks it into smaller financings. And so the very first phase is what we call the domestic portion of the pipeline, which is bringing gas down from the North Slope to Anchorage. It's a 42-inch pipeline, which for our domestic needs is quite large, but we won't be putting the compression in that original, that initial phase design. There's enough pressure coming out of the slope to free flow, and that will allow us to de-risk the Alaskan energy supply. And in order to do that, we have to analyze with the volume we're flowing and the pricing that we need to charge for that. Is that reasonable, and does that avoid the energy emergency in Alaska? And it does. and the amount of financing we need to do there is reasonable. So that's check, number one. The second phase is when I'm talking to my international partners that want to buy LNG, one of the things they say to me is, well, that's really great. Now that we know the pipeline's going to be built, we can just focus on the liquefaction facility being built. And so the first phase of that, we can break it down into train one. There are 3 trains for the 20 million tons, train 1, train 2, train 3. And then we can do another FID, a final investment decision, where we commit all the capital and all the construction starts. And that's the second phase. And then the final phase is when we go to the full volume of LNG, and then we have to build the complete gas plant on the Arctic slope, because the CO2 content of Prudhoe Bay gas requires a lot more processing. And so there are 3 phases. Each of them can reach their final investment decision, attract capital in independent financings. And so these are really bite-sized financings. And over the last 10 years, there's been $200 billion of independently sponsored US LNG projects. So actually the predominant form of financing for LNG facilities in the US has not been on the balance sheets of the big oil and gas companies. It's actually been independently sponsored projects. And so we're going to take the same business model.
So we've all heard of cost overruns, that projects of this size, this scale, this scope, magnitude, there's going to be cost overruns. It doesn't matter what your feed says. There are going to be huge cost overruns. You just have to look at Canada projects there or Australia projects there. What do you say to that?
Well, the first thing is I have to look at these things as a developer from the ground up. And the first analysis I do is just basic fundamentals. And when I look at those fundamentals, I know what it costs today to build a liquefaction facility on the coast of the United States, because I'm bidding out my modules, my OEM equipment. Some of my business partners are here doing that for me. So I know what it costs to build an LNG facility on the Gulf Coast, the cost to build that on the Alaska coast. The labor's going to be a little bit more. It'll be slightly higher. But I know the efficiency and the ambient temperature here is fantastic if you're an operating engineer. So we'll get more efficiency out of it compared to the Gulf Coast. So immediately I actually know the cost of building the liquefaction facility, and that's 40% of this budget. And I know it's reasonable, and I know it's reasonable in these market conditions. And so that's the first step. I know that I can build that, and that works. Then I look at the pipeline, right? And the first thing I look at is what are unit rates for constructing pipeline. So if we were in Texas and it was just flat and we just were going straight across Texas, easy, $150,000 per inch mile. So the diameter of the pipe and the distance. That's a metric used in the lower 48 for easy construction. Then I put on that, let's say, a 60% premium to $250,000 per inch mile to take into account the extreme conditions of Alaska. And then I put another 40% on top of that, and I come up with my budget to take into account cost overruns. Now, the thing to remember with a pipeline is 15% of it is actually metal and steel and equipment. The rest of it is logistics, planning, man camps, labor, oversight, testing. And so the real problem with constructing a pipeline, it's not constructing it, it's when you're not constructing it. When the construction crews are stuck in the mountains or in the snow, there's a regulatory approval, or a lawyer in head office won't approve a rerouting. So I look at why would we stay at those price ranges. It's because it's a very unique situation. And I challenge everyone in the room, and there's people who have done projects around the world, where someone would come to you and say, Brendan, here's a pipeline. All the engineering's already done. It was done by one of the largest engineering firms in the world. At the time, it was reviewed by Exxon and Conoco. You're in a right-of-way where all the access roads and all the right-of-way is parallel to a globally recognized pipeline and a state-run rail system. All the geotech drilling that you need to take a view on it has been done. And by the way, you still have access to the old records. And where you're coming from, there's thousands of employees up on the North Slope that know how to live and work in the Arctic, and say, do you think you can get that construction cost right? And I say, absolutely. Very few people get the opportunity with such preparation in place to make that decision. And the unit rates, I'm telling you, are unit rates today. These aren't out-of-date unit rates. And so the main concern that Governor Dunleavy and I discussed is some of the Western Canada pipelines that had cost overruns that went beyond that. That was because their construction crews were stuck looking at each other, where the corporate headquarters was worried about federal and state permitting government agencies telling them to stop if they went down the wrong route. And so here we've got the gold-plated outcome is we're in Alaska, we have met both the secretaries and the administrator, the 3 cabinet level people that said anything that we need will be approved at the right pace quickly. The thing is, everything is already approved. So it really, really, really is a unique situation that I feel blessed to have been invited to lead.
So this project has known gas. We've known it for decades. We recycle the gas up in the North Slope. We know what the gas content is, the gas amounts, et cetera. And new gas is being discovered as some of our operators up there are finding new gas, ancillary gas to oil. So we have the gas. We know what the gas is. We have the right-of-ways established. We have the we don't have an issue with native claim settlement. That was settled back in the 70s, unlike some of the other countries that we're talking about. We have the support of the vast majority of Alaskans and Americans. You saw that on the polls that we showed the first day that we were here. And again, the right-of-ways are there. I will say one thing about the Biden administration. When there were court cases that came up, and there's always going to be court cases, they fought those court cases on our behalf. FERC under Biden fought those court cases on our behalf, and those court cases were settled in our favor. So court cases, permitting, licensing, right away, gas amounts, gas quantities, social license from the people here in Alaska, support from people in America, and we know what the shipping is going to be. If you want to just talk briefly about the shipping, how the shipping from Alaska compares to the Gulf Coast or other places in the world.
So ultimately, as we probably know in the room, LNG is sold on a price per MMBTU. So I bought a cargo of LNG just last week, delivered into the coast of Colombia. We unloaded it. We paid about $12.50 per MMBTU. If you look at long-term futures, the long-term price in theory, which it's technical, is probably $9 or $10 per MMBTU. So we know what the price of LNG is. I've just signed $40 billion worth of contracts for my project in Texas. So I look at the fundamental build-up of what creates a price stack for building out an LNG pricing arrangement, because I have to do it regularly. So the first thing we look at is shipping. What is the shipping from Alaska? And I'm really comparing to other great American LNG, because our friends that want to sign with the United States have a choice, Gulf Coast or Alaska. So if you're shipping from the Gulf Coast, you either have to go through Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is so busy now with so much global trade, you can have a 10-day wait on either side of the Panama Canal. You've got to go to Japan or Taiwan or Thailand and come back, wait again, and come through. So most of the boats now are actually going around Africa, passing under India and coming through the Straits of Malacca. A lot of contested waters. There are things called pirates. Look at some movies. And they eventually arrive into Asia. That's 3 times the travel distance, which means 3 times the cost. So we have a 300% advantage shipping from Alaska. So that's the first truism. The second truism, we have stranded gas up on the North Slope. I know the price that we're settling out with our friends up there. And I compare that to Henry Hub, which is feed gas. So I'm comparing feed gas in Alaska, feed gas on the Gulf Coast. And that's anywhere for the long-term futures. People here that know about the Henry Hub futures, they're $4, $4.50. And then in a volatile time, it can go to $6. We've got a 200 to 300% advantage with our feed gas coming out of Alaska. So second truism, we're ahead on shipping, we're ahead on the feed gas. Then I look at the actual cost to pay for my facility that's the end of the pipeline, called the liquefaction facility. And I just told you, it's roughly the same cost when I take into account unit rates. I'm building one on the Gulf Coast. It'll cost a little more to build here in Alaska, but I get more throughput per piece of equipment because of the great ambient conditions. So I'm ahead on feed gas, ahead on shipping, break even on the liquefaction fee. When you do all that analysis, I'm 150% better before I then go and look at paying for the pipeline. And I can put, I just went through the way you can actually analyze pipelines. I put the highest estimate in there for that, and I can still deliver to Asia at a 20 to 30% discount, depending on where the volatile price of Henry Hub is. And we can actually offer fixed price if we need to. So it's a very, very unique opportunity to sell, and a very, very unique opportunity to buy if you want US LNG that's not going through contested waters, that's cheaper than the alternative at less risk given the distances. So it's just truisms why this works.
So I'll go back. I want to go back for a second on the cost overruns in certain countries. Is that an absolute, or are there examples in America where there weren't the cost overruns that occurred in some of these other countries?
So I think that's an important point. Back in the old days, national governments or oil and gas majors were the only entities that built LNG facilities. And I take it back, some of the old timers here may remember the IPP outbreak in the 80s, where suddenly utilities didn't have to own the power plants, independent developers. And so the LNG world has gone through that same transition where independent developers have now, but I wouldn't say the norm, but very much successful. And why have the independent developers been successful? There is so much capital available for good projects through the bank market, the bond market, on the debt side. All these infrastructure funds can't find enough place to put good money. Everywhere the private equity infrastructure funds have put money in the United States in LNG, they've made really good money because the projects have been so well put together. Why are they so well put together? When you do it's a technical term in the world of finance, project financing, the only money that's available is the money in that one company that's building. The only reason it's there is to build that project. So the amount of scrutiny you have from the rating agencies, the bondholders, the banks that do this for a living, and then you have another partner investor, and they sit down and you go over the numbers, and then you can't go back for more money. So it creates this amazing discipline to bring the cost down, get the execution nailed, and you don't get that cost overrun. Now, things will go wrong. We've got a contingency. We've got second checks, so we've got to set some money aside for known problems. And I'm not saying this is going to be easy. We will have problems. We're going to be on the phone with our contractors and our partners. But these things get done, and we're doing it in a way where we get 10, 15 sets of eyes looking at the numbers before anyone allows us to start spending the money. And that's the discipline of project finance. And that's why you often see the independent developers not having the cost overruns of the major companies that, if not careful, can be perceived to have endless balance sheets to keep funding when people on the tools change their mind.
So it's one project, but three distinct phases that could have different types of financing, different types of ownership over that, your liquefaction plant, an export facility, your pipe, and the gas conditioning plant on the slope. Just talk a little bit again about the phases and timelines, because we did talk about our need here in Alaska for gas. I mean, the thing that's always, I think, galled Alaskans internally and governors and elected officials is we are literally drowning in energy. We've talked about this all this week. Incredible wind resources. I mean, just out this door, right here, Cook Inlet, you have hundreds of years of coal, you have major gas field, major oil field, incredible wind sources like no other place on the planet. You have geothermal with our 130 volcanoes. One is 90 miles, I think, distance is 90 miles from here. Again, tide, all kinds of energy, biomass, you name it. But because of our distance, our scale, our population being spread out, we've always been hampered by high energy costs. So again, what happened last year was absolutely a game changer. It really put to rest for us in the state of Alaska that maybe we can wait this out, that maybe something will come, that we'll figure something out. When you have bases that have to scramble F-35s, when you have Army bases that have to be able to deploy troops rapidly in case of conflict, I mean, you all saw what happened with the balloons flying over Alaska, North America a couple years ago. The neighborhood that we live in, we have got to make sure, and this is a discussion we're having with the Trump administration, and they're very aware of this, but we have got to make sure we have gas. So when we look at the timelines in terms of when do you think you're going to wrap up feed, and again, you mentioned, which I think is very important, A lot of the engineering has already been done on this by great engineering from anyone that looks at this would tell you that. So you got to update feed on the pipe, and then let's talk about timelines on the feed process, the FID process, ordering, that sort of thing on the pipe, and then we can go to the other components.
So I think you've heard the phrase FID, Final Investment Decision. And on that day, it's a really big, important day in a project's life where typically you draw down on the capital for the first time and you issue notice to proceed to your contracting partners. You place the purchase orders. So we've got a fast-track, ambitious set of steps to get to that by December this year, Q4 this year. Now that's ambitious, guys. You'll have stone throwers saying if we miss it by a day or we're early, but that is achievable. And why is it achievable? It's because the engineering that was done for this, and you bring any pipeline contractor or any pipeline developer, and they will tell you, I've never seen this much amount of engineering at this phase of the project. So we're doing what we call a top-up feed, where we're going to be pricing, we're bringing contractors in, and let's come back to the local partnering later, Governor, because that's really important for the people in this room. And we're going to price that, and I had meetings here with suppliers of steel and pipe, and so we're going through a logistics plan, how to get so much pipe in at time. And so we're going to, over the next 6 months, financing, planning, talking to the loan program, which is another thing we should talk about, financing, final engineering, and we issue notice to proceed in December. That gives us 2026 to do a lot of the detailed engineering, the detailed planning, issue the purchase orders into the steel mills, so then they can send the steel to the pipe mills. And then we'll start stockpiling pipe towards the second half of next year, so that we can hit the construction seasons of 2027, 2028. We'll have 4 spreads up the pipeline. We've been talking about double teaming some of the spreads to speed it up. So we're dropping pipe in 2027. The second batch of pipe comes in 2027, and we drop that into the ground in 2028. And our objective is to try and get gas flowing. Again, we've got to be ambitious. Maybe to Fairbanks by the end of 2028, maybe. But definitely we'll have the thing done by 2029. That's going to be a lot of hard work, but that's our objective. And we can talk separately about the LNG facility if you want.
Yes.
So the whole thing is about de-risking, de-risking, de-risking. So our partners in Asia, when they sign a long-term LNG offtake, they have to commit for every ton of LNG tens of billions of dollars over the next 20 years. So when they sign their agreement with us, they have to have confidence we'll get it built, otherwise they've wasted that time. And so having issued notice to proceed on the pipeline, that's a huge de-risking event. So what we'll do through 2026 is we'll actually do a deep dive feed, because LNG technology and LNG manufacturing capabilities have improved tremendously over the years. It's not like they're getting worse, they're getting better. So I really want to run a re-engineering process during 2026. And then, because the value engineering outcomes we had in Texas LNG were superb. And so we want to do the same thing here. So the aim would be to issue notice to proceed on the LNG facility at the end of 2026. And typically the LNG facility will take somewhere in that, it's no shorter than 4 years, and you really want to get it done in less than 5 years. So then that brings us into first LNG, again, maybe some testing LNG in 2030, and up and running with cargoes into Asia in 2031.
And this is using some of our lower carbon gas on the slope, and then once you're going through the process with the liquefaction plant, you're doing feed updates on the conditioning plant on the slope as well.
Yeah, so we've got a big plant we call the Arctic Carbon Capture. CO2 is stuck with some of the gas, particularly at a high level out of Prudhoe Bay. And so there's a very significant processing plant that is much more important for Train 2 and Train 3 and that full expense. And so really we'll reach FID on that at the end of 2026 as well, because we want to do some re-engineering during the year of 2026. And that'll be online in time to supply Trains 2 and 3. And we'll probably need some of it for Train 1, but there's final engineering around that.
If you can, talk about some of the benefits to local contractors, local workers. I know currently the work being done on the slope, and what we refer to is just the beginning of the renaissance in oil. There's thousands of new workers up there working on projects such as Willow, Peak, and others. As those projects, as some of those projects wind down, obviously some of those workers could be hopefully come to this project to use their expertise, and they're being located in Alaska. But what's the size of the workforce in the construction of this project for the 6 years or so that you anticipate construction will take?
So, talking about local engagement, local involvement. When Governor Dunleavy and Frank and Matt and Brad and their team at AGDC, we started talking about this project, I actually read as many books as I could on the TAPS pipeline. There's a couple of online documentaries, and it really is an amazing effort of teamwork and the local knowledge that they didn't have back then on building the pipelines that's available now is really, really fantastic. And so one of the reasons we brought Worley on as our engineering partner to do a bunch of work is their knowledge of how to get the right partnerships with local employees, local contractors, the Alaskan Native corporations. And so during construction, at the peak, we'll probably have something in the order of 5,000 workers if you add up the peak, and then over time, there's probably 1,000 full-time jobs if you do the extended analysis along the pipeline and the LNG facility. And so we will be going through a second phase once we've got the large balance sheets of the global partners to figure. They need to partner with locals. We've made a commitment in our joint venture to really work and give every opportunity to our local partners. And I'd just say, it's amazing the number of emails that I've received, and so I don't know if anyone's in the room that sent it, but they looked up my email address and they said, Brendan, my grandfather worked on the TAPS. He always said there was going to be a gas line. You know, this is fantastic. Or I graduated high school 3 years ago. Is there any way I could get an apprenticeship? It's like, I actually can't reply to all of them. And so the amount of local support, if you compare that to a different country or a different state, it's really amazing. So there is an amazing amount. Like, we're actually going to overwhelm the local workforce, and which is a good thing, I think. But you guys better get ready. There's going to be a lot of employment happening here.
So let me take a minute just to summarize things, and I'm going to give you the balance at the time to just tell the people, our Asian customers, potential workers, contractors, financiers, and even skeptics. But so just take a second and in your mind, think about this for a moment. If you had a project, a large gas project that had all the permits, that would be of value. If you had all the right-of-ways established, that would be of value. If you had all the known gas quantities that have been recycled for decades, we don't flare our gas as a practice up in Alaska, that would be valuable. If you have a history of building large projects, including pioneering LNG export to our Asian allies, that might be valuable. If you have a short shipping distance, one of the shortest in the world for gas of this type in this location in the world, that would be of value. If you had a Democratic and Republican administration supporting this project, surely that would be of value. If you had a president currently that puts this project as one of the top projects on his list and continually talks about it and gets updates on it. You saw the three gentlemen that were here this week. That should be of value. If you have a known, and Glenfarne is known, if you have a known LNG company that works with LNG, South America, Texas, knows Gulf Coast, knows LNG, and is partnering with some of the best engineering firms in the world, that should be of value. So really what we're looking at, correct me if I'm wrong, is we're looking at updating feet on the pipe. Once that pipe is de-risked, people have told me that if the gas was on the coast and you didn't need a pipe, the gas would be flowing already. But once the pipe is de-risked and you go to FID, the rest of it sounds like it's going to come together pretty rapidly. Do you want to talk about some?
Well, the governor makes it so easy.
Just like that.
The reality is, everyone in this room knows mega projects are difficult. There's sleepless nights. You've got to have really strong partners. You arm wrestle over difficult decisions. You got to partner, never give up, and be optimistic. But as the governor said, when you go down the list of, and the whole right-of-way is paralleling, whether it's the equipment on the North Slope, all the way down to the peninsula where there's already a mothballed LNG facility. The whole route is there. That, like all those projects that have the cost overruns, The ones that are done in the jungle, the outback of Australia, the jungle of South America, Mozambique, they're all done through pioneered routes where literally the first is chopping with machetes, getting through. This is, as odd as it sounds, it is just hard to believe how much is lined up here. And once you break it down into the pieces, then the scale of it becomes less daunting. So there's no doubt this is going to be really, really hard and a lot of angst, but it really is a tremendous opportunity, and I invite everyone in the room to be part of it and step forward where you want to be involved.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question that I probably shouldn't ask. Confidence level. Are we going to have a pipeline here in a few years?
Well, I see every reason why we will, and I've come here and I've put my name on it, and when I put my name on something, I'm stuck. I got to get it done, and the fundamentals allowed me to do that with good decision making, not rolling the dice. So the answer is yes.
Well, as they said on the slope, drill baby drill and build baby build. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you very much.